This is the Tools for Change workshop. I am privileged and honored to introduce our distinguished panelists today. My name is Melissa Mead, and I'm an associate professor here at Colby-Sawyer College. I teach in the Media Studies Department and the Women's Studies Department. Now, in the academy, we talk a lot about how to bridge theory and practice still. We think about the histories and the underpinnings of social inequality, and we theorize the meaning of rights, of freedoms, and about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a boy and a girl. We also strategize ways to translate these theories into practice, into our material realities, we like to say, our everyday worlds. And we also like to think about the ways that our everyday lives inform our ideas and our theories. So our panelists today have years of experience in these realms of translating ideas into action, and our hope for this panel is that every single one of us here can begin to think of ways to be agents of change. I know we all already are in many ways, but to begin to think about ways that we can affect change in our communities in small ways and also in big ways, ranging from grassroots initiatives to legislative work and talking about the media. So let's just get right to it. I think in terms of logistics, I'm going to just very briefly introduce everybody. You've got your programs, and we've all met each other at this point, and let them have at it. And then at the end, we can open it up for Q&A. So we're going to start here on my left with Jeff Feingold. He's a longtime journalist and is currently the editor of the New Hampshire Business Review, where he's worked for more than 20 years. He's also a contributor to a new political website called The Lobby, thelobbynh.com. And so he's going to talk to us about both traditional and new media.
Thanks very much, Melissa. I appreciate that. You know, before I came here, I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, which maybe would impress you all today. I think would be a good idea that I thought about it. But, you know, I was thinking about change and being an activist and just trying to make things better in the world. And I realized that I've been trying to do that since about 13 years old, because that was the year, believe it or not, I became politically involved. Was when I was 13. There was a special election for an open congressional seat in my district in Brooklyn. And the congressman who had been there for 100 years, like it was part of the machine, he had died. And then there was a special election, and it was a Democratic primary, because that's the only party in New York, at least at the time. And it was between a guy named Bert Podell, who was the machine candidate, and a guy named Mel Dubin, whom somehow my parents knew somehow, because my mother had gone to a couple of women's strike for peace meetings at people's houses and stuff. And I got all caught up in this whole idea of fighting against the war. I was 13. But I thought it was really important. And I worked for the campaign, put up signs, also volunteered to tear down signs from the other people from the other campaign. But it was really something, and it was really just energizing. He lost. But also during his candidacy, he had a big rally. And a guy named Eugene McCarthy spoke at this rally. And it was about a month before New Hampshire. And I heard him speak. I went, this guy is really cool. So I went down to his headquarters in New York, or over near Columbus Circle. I joined that. And by the end of 1968, I guess I had just I wanted to see things change. But because of the events, a lot of the people in this room don't even know about 1968. But I'll just give you a lot of things happened in 1968. I think by the end of that year, I was radicalized, and I think I should write my memoir. I was a gopher for the SDS or something like that. But I'm just thinking about this. But so I did moderate my beliefs, but also that's why I'm in the news media, because this is a way I think things can change, at least by informing people and getting messages out, whether it's your own or it's other people's. I mean, I know my job as the editor of a newspaper or as a reporter is to present all sides of an issue that I can find. But I also think part of the thing that people need to understand about media is that issues often aren't, reporters and editors are not aware of certain issues. until they are made aware of it. And I think that's something that's really important for people in this room to remember. It's really important to interact with reporters and editors, to tell them your story, to tell them the issues that are important to you. And that's something that I think that's one thing you can take home. And almost everybody who's a professional journalist who I know, they want to hear about other things to write about. They want to hear about what's on people's minds, what's going on out there in the world. I don't know unless someone tells me, you know. And I think that's something to remember. So I think this is a way to just get into this. What I wanted to talk about was, how to get in touch with the media. For shorthand purposes, I'm going to use the word newspaper, which I think some people in this room might still read in their hands, But that also means to me like a newspaper that also provides information online through social media tools. Because they're really what they are, information gathering services, and they just disseminate the information. So I'm going to use that word newspaper, but don't just think of it as the newspaper itself. And I'm also going to talk about the other old line media called television and radio, which I think certain people of an age in this room don't even use those things anymore. But they are very important. And that's one of the things I wanted to say was there's been a huge proliferation in social media, Twitter, Facebook, over the last few years. And it's just dynamic. It's unbelievable how much information is out there. But it's but it's good to remember that while all that information is out there and being discussed, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time the information they're discussing is information in response to something that's been reported in newspapers, television, or radio first. It's funny because I have an app on my phone that gives me the headlines. And I think it's through Google. It's an Android phone, so it's Google or something. And it gives you the headlines, the world, US, business, sports, all the other stuff, the gossip and everything. And almost every single one of those stories links to a website of a news organization that's, a newspaper, television, or radio, like NPR stuff. And that's important to remember that that's where the news is basically being covered originally. But, I'm not saying bloggers don't do a good job, but if you're going to go to a blog for your initial source of information, you're going to be missing stuff. Because a lot of bloggers are not exactly interested in telling both sides of a story or more than one side of a story or getting you to understand all of the facts involved. They're usually trying to get you motivated to do something. So that's something to remember is newspapers, television, radio still, while they are in many ways dying economically, financially, they're not as information gathering and information disseminating sources. The basic way how to get a newspaper to cover your story is really hard. You pick up the phone, you call the editor, you call a reporter, and you tell them, I would like you. I have an idea for a story. Or, on the other hand, if you have an issue you're interested in, you write a letter to the editor, or you say, this is something that's going on in my town, in my community. I'll give an example of something actually, an issue you've discussed here. Monica Zuloff of the Manchester YWCA, she's been involved in workplace flexibility issues, and Monica, I think you've all met her, so she's not shy about talking on the phone. She and some other people got in touch with me and asked me, as the editor of the New Hampshire Business Review, if I would be interested in working with them on these issues, on workplace flexibility. And I listened to them, and I thought that was a great idea. And it wasn't something that I was really on my radar screen. But since then, I've done tons of articles on workplace flexibility, on all kinds of workplace-related issues that I wouldn't even have thought about unless Monica called me up. Similarly, the same is true with child care issues. I was dealing with people at AARP New Hampshire, and we talked about doing a series of articles on issues that affect workers 50 and older, which we've done. But along the way, we discovered that there were issues involving family care. I shouldn't say child care, family care, where people who are in a certain age group, and I'm sure there are people like this in this room, who find themselves caring for multiple generations of family members, older and younger. And it's an issue that affects the workplace. It's an issue that affects employers and fellow employees. And it was something that really wasn't being discussed in New Hampshire very much. And because of that, we did do that. And it was because really, someone from AARP was calling us and saying, this is something that's important. This is an important issue for you to discuss. This is an important issue for you to explore. And we did a whole series of articles that lasted over a year on those issues. It's not that I didn't want to discuss these issues. We didn't want to write about these issues. That we need to be made aware of them. And that's what you do when you call up a newspaper or a television station or a radio station. That's what you do when you write to them, email them. I can get into specifics later if you want about, if anyone wants to talk to me later about specifically how you go about, crafting an email or crafting a press release. That's certainly something I'm more than happy to talk about. But I'm just hoping that you think about how important it is to not just read the newspapers, be aware of issues, but to bring the issues to the awareness of the journalists who are putting together the information you're reading. There are so many issues today that have been discussed that I know the New Hampshire media don't even think about them. They're busy covering, Rick Perry trying to still remember the third department he wants to cut. But it's something. It's an important point to think about how we think about the media as being like these huge monoliths, but not in New Hampshire. They're not. They're very approachable, very easy to get to. Even the union leader is approachable, believe it or not. And they will listen to you. They might not listen to everything you say. They might not want to hear everything you want to say, but they'll listen to you. And it's really good to approach them because that's how you can help define the conversation, to help bring about an understanding of issues that right now people may not be aware of, and they might not think much of. Because there's a lot of issues here today that have been discussed that people, very, very worthwhile issues that should be discussed at a local level, but they're not at this point. And I would hope that some people in this room are going to go out there and try their best to get it, to use the energy they're getting out of this caucus to go out there and work to teach not only other people, but teach the media that these issues really exist.
Okay, great. We're sharing mics. Okay, our next esteemed panelist is Carolyn Morissette. And Carolyn Morissette is the Director of Social Media at Southern New Hampshire University. A web developer, Ms. Morissette pioneered the use of web technologies in student recruitment, helping to develop many of the online recruitment strategies considered best practices today. She writes for online as well. I think I'll leave it at that. You have your programs in front of you, so thanks, Carolyn.
I write for one of those evil blogs that doesn't care about covering things.
I knew I was in trouble.
No, so I have a little bit of a confession to make, and I didn't tell you guys about this, but exactly 1 week ago at this time, I was off getting married, so my name actually has changed. Carolyn Borisianka, I think I'm saying it correctly. My husband is Ukrainian. And I gotta tell you guys, it is wreaking havoc on my social media presences. Because, social media partly is about putting your personality out there, building a brand, doing all those good things. And I was thinking on the drive up here, there's actually a couple really key social media lessons that I think you guys can learn from my wedding. Because I'm very out there on social media. I have thousands of Twitter followers. I write on the blogs. I do all that good stuff. And, I think lesson number one that I'd like you guys to walk out here about social media is that it's not about the tools. It's not about Facebook and Twitter and Flickr and YouTube and whatever else you want to use. It's about building relationships with people. It's about making those one-on-one connections. And that's how you're going to build the community, and that's how you're going to become change agents in your world. Now, I work in higher education, so not as engrossed in the political scene as I'm sure everyone else in this room is, but I got to tell you guys, colleges are not quick to change. And, you know, in higher ed, the web development community has actually grown so big and is a thriving community because we're all these people that are fighting for change at our colleges every day. And so we've got a really robust community from it. And, you know, I was looking around at the crowd at my wedding, and, you know, a good quarter of them are people from the community, because a couple years ago I started blogging out in that community and getting to know people, and eventually formed these close relationships, so close that I invited them to my wedding. And, you know, it's about listening and engaging. And I think the biggest mistake that people make when they start thinking about social media is they think, I've got to have a Facebook page and I've got to push all of my messages out there, and everyone who agrees with me will come and read my Facebook page and they'll find out what I'm interested in. That's not how it works. So think of it like a networking event. Think of it as something like this. And maybe you're kind of new to the scene, but you've got a cause that you really care about, and you're pretty sure at this networking event other people are going to care about it too. And you come in and you maybe join a circle of people who are just chit-chatting and they're making small talk. Do you bust right in there and say, hi, my name is Jenny Jones and this is my issue and this is what I care about? No. I would hope not, or your issue's probably not going to get very far, right? You sit down at the table, you say, hi, I'm Jenny Jones. What do you do? What do you care about? You listen, you try to engage. There are so many tools out there that are great listening tools. You know, on Twitter, you can look for hashtags. You can search for different terms that people are talking about. That'll help you find your people, help you start to build those relationships, and then build that community. I had a friend of mine who Mercedes-Benz did this Twitter race back in January. It was on the Super Bowl, and they had 4 different teams, and they started at different locations around the country, and they were driving cars that were actually going to be fueled by Twitter, by tweets that people were sending out. And part of how people were selected for these teams were about their Twitter following, how they were able to rally and engage their community. Well, my friend had the least number of followers of any of the teams, and he was completely convinced that he was the pawn in this whole scheme. He was set up to lose because there were a couple Maxim models in one of the other cars, and he thought that they were definitely going to win. But because he rallied the community in such a way, he took the smallest number of Twitter followers and crushed everyone else in that competition, like double the points of anyone else in that competition, ended up winning a car from it, which isn't as great as what you guys are trying to do, but, you know, the kid walked away with a Mercedes-Benz, so we can't fault him for that. Rule number 2, I guess, that I would say, you know, you can learn from my wedding is this. And if you walk away from nothing else out of what I'm going to say, walk away with this. You should never restrict what you're doing, any event that you're doing, any thing that you're trying to put together, to the people who are in the room that day. Right? So this is a pretty good event, right? It's sold out in advance. One would think more people would want to come to this event that could actually make it in the room. But is it being live streamed somewhere? Is there a Twitter hashtag for it? Actually, I looked on the Caucus's Twitter account before I came up here and noticed, you know, the Twitter account's pushing out a lot of great messages talking about all the things that are happening today, but there's no hashtag for it. There's no way for people to follow the event that aren't here. You know, I woke up on the morning of my wedding and was looking at my Twitter feed, and I had a lot of people asking me, Carlin, are you going to live stream this? I was like, no, God. And then, you know, I thought back to something a guy that I work with at SNU said. His name is Seth Odell. He does all our video marketing. And he likes to say, if you are not live streaming your events, you do not care about your community. Ooh. A little bit harsh. Right? A little bit harsh. And when he first said that to me, I argued with him about it. I said, Seth, you're being a little bit dramatic, aren't you? He said, no, because your community exists beyond what is in your room today. So if you're not live streaming, you don't care. And I said, well, you know, it takes resources to live stream. It takes training. It takes tools. It takes everything, you know, that we don't have right now. So maybe I care, but maybe I just don't have the tools to do it. He said, BS. Okay, Carlin, how many people in this room own an iPhone? How many? Come on, raise your hands. Okay. How many people own like an Android, something with a video camera? All right. Every single one of you could be live streaming this event right now. And that's actually how we did it at my wedding, because I thought about that. I said, oh, I gotta do it. People are gonna give me crap forever and a day if I don't do this. So we actually had someone at the wedding with an iPhone just live streaming there. Absolutely free, took no advanced preparation. So I guess, anytime you're putting something together like this, think about ways that you can share it beyond the community that you've got right in front of you. You have to be thinking about, live streaming, then archiving that video. Video archives are so important. We live in an on-demand society. I mean, one of the reasons that I think TV is gonna die is because everything is on demand now. People can watch it when they want to. You gotta think about Twitter, you gotta think about Facebook. All these things work together. And I'm not going to talk about the specifics of how this works. I have business cards up here if you guys want to get into the specifics of the tools, but just be thinking about the larger issues. Engaging your community, building those one-to-one relationships. Social media is just a tool to do it. It's nothing special. So.
Great. I have a friend who tweeted from the labor room giving birth. I wouldn't want to do that. At any rate, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about grassroots organizing. And so our next panelist is Jamila Raqib, and she is Executive Director at the Albert Einstein Institution, a nonprofit organization focused on the study and the use of strategic nonviolent action in conflicts throughout the world.
Thanks very much, Melissa, and thanks for those fascinating remarks, guys. I'm really honored to be here today. This is a really historic event, and so thank you for the invitation to participate. I hope my comments today are helpful. I'd like to ask you all to think about the most serious political challenges of our time and our responses to them in a different way. And in doing that, perhaps we can see a solution that can be very important for the future of our world. Dictatorships, oppression, invasions, occupations, injustices of all kinds. These problems exist, and at times when we watch the news or read it online or in newspapers, they can seem overwhelming. Around the world, many people that are experiencing injustice are asking a very daunting but important political question. That is, how can we become free? How can we drive out a foreign occupation, stop a foreign invasion? How can we oust our dictator and replace our oppressive system with one that is more free, more just, more representative, and allows for greater participation? Many well-meaning people think that if they simply denounce oppression long enough and protest it strong enough, the desired outcome will somehow materialize. There's a general helplessness when people feel like they can't make change. It's a condition that comes from a sense that you lack the tools to control your own life, let alone shape the societal, political, economic, international events that are taking place around you. The helplessness works in favor of dictators and of oppressive rulers. They'll try to make you think that they're stronger than they actually are. They'll try to make you think that power comes from a barrel of a gun, and since they have all the guns, resistance is futile. The problem for people facing oppression is twofold. How do you weaken an oppressive system? And how do you strengthen a population so that it's able to resist powerfully and effectively? There's a quote by an Indian sociologist that really resonates with me, and it's a real basis for the work that I do. The tyrant has the power to inflict only that which we lack the strength to resist. Nonviolent action is that powerful and effective means to conduct a struggle and to strengthen a population. It has a long history, and it's freed millions of people living under tyranny all over the world. It's been used in various types of conflicts throughout human history to resist oppression, to undermine dictatorships, to oppose foreign invasion and occupation, to defend the rights of minorities, of women, of workers, and to expand freedoms of all kinds. For nearly 30 years, the Albert Einstein Institution, which has been led by our senior scholar, Gene Sharp, has been studying how nonviolent means of struggle actually operate. So what we do is we study the historical cases of the use of nonviolent means of action. So we've distilled from that information on how the technique operates, what makes it work, what are the factors that lead to failure, and how that information can be used by groups who are looking to explore these means for their struggles today. We've shared the results of this research through books, both printed and online, so that people who want to develop their own strategies can do so, and they can do that self-reliantly. Until I started working with Gene Sharp, I thought that violent means were the only way to solve serious political problems, including those that are experienced by Afghanistan, where I was born. That was because, like so many other people, I didn't know that there existed this powerful, pragmatic alternative to violence. And as I learned more about this unique approach, I began to recognize this technique as a powerful weapon system, as an alternative to both violence and also passivity. So how does it work? The basic idea is very simple. The technique is quite complex, but it's based on an analysis of where power comes from in a society. So all governments, whether democratic or even extreme dictatorships, rely on cooperation and obedience from people and institutions for their survival. When people choose to withdraw that cooperation and obedience, governments are left without any of the sources of power that are necessary for them to function. So basically, people refuse to do that which they're told to do and do that which is forbidden. And instead of using guns and bombs, people use social, economic, and political forms of non-cooperation. And ultimately, these weapons are more powerful than military ones. So the struggles in North Africa and in the Middle East have brought a lot of new attention to this technique. But what you see on your television screens is only the tip of the iceberg. Street protests, demonstrations, parades, and vigils, they're very important as symbolic methods to demonstrate that people are angry, demonstrate dissatisfaction. But the most powerful part of the struggle is what you don't see and what the news media can't often capture. These are the methods of non-cooperation and defiance. What you have to do is paralyze your opponent, be that a repressive government or economic system or a corporation. You'll notice I didn't mention anything about the need for participants in these struggles to be moral or good or any of those subjective and hard to define terms. Nonviolent action ultimately depends on people doing what people do best, which is be annoyingly stubborn when they make up their minds to do that. The events of this year, specifically the Tunisian revolutions, the ones in Egypt, and the ongoing struggles that are taking place in Syria and Bahrain and Yemen and elsewhere, in our streets as well, have brought about a new awareness. That awareness has had a massive impact on people's thinking. It'll make it very difficult for those whose rule depends on complacency and helplessness, because people have seen what's possible. The power of ordinary people and the weakness of oppressive systems and of dictators has been dramatically displayed for all of us to see. And that alone has changed the world. But the awareness alone is not enough. In order to succeed, it helps to have a wise plan, or what we call a grand strategy. In order to have a wise plan, you need to study. It's crucial to understand how the technique operates so that this information can help guide you in the development of your own struggle. The lessons gained from our books, and I have a few here today, are potentially useful to groups facing very diverse conflicts on nearly every continent and perhaps even Antarctica. People think that the last thing they should do to prepare for change in their societies is to read a book, but actually that's the first thing you should do. In our experience, access to these writings can be critical. People risk their lives to translate them. People are serving jail sentences for carrying even a single copy of this book written by Gene Sharp. These are all available to us, so I advise you to check them out. The resources that are needed to make struggles more effective are now available to groups, much more so than in the past. Groups who are engaged in these struggles no longer need to reinvent the wheel. Freedom from tyranny ultimately depends on people's ability to liberate themselves. By the time we at the Albert Einstein Institution hear from people, something has changed in their minds. Because whatever it is that's brought them to our doors or caused them to write us an email or call us up has planted a seed in their mind. It's a seed of an awareness of a possibility. That possibility is that they can take action, that action can be effective, and that effectiveness can lead to greater chances that they're going to be successful in bringing about the changes they want in their societies. The massive uprisings that have taken place this year in the world, they were triggered and carried out by regular people like you and I, not by elite powers. Ultimately, it's up to us to free ourselves. And the good news is that with careful thinking, wise planning, and courageous action, doing that is within our grasp. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next, excuse me, our next panelist, Dakin, is a veteran of philanthropic and grassroots organizing. In 2003, after a 40-year career in financial services, she shifted her focus and founded the Women's Trust, a nonprofit organization devoted to improving the economic status, health, and education of women and girls in Ghana. Thank you, Dana.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to follow on the heels of Wilma Longden in the morning program, and I thought she just was fantastic. So I'm talking, this is a Tools for Change program, making a difference through focused volunteer philanthropy or your own grassroots activity. That's the title. And I think the operative word is focused. I think that's a word we overlook. Operative word, that focus leads to satisfaction. It leads to passion. Passion regenerates what you're committed to. And when you recommit to what you're doing, you get through the issues, the problems. That leads to impact. And I think that's what our volunteer work and our philanthropy work should be about. So many of us do our philanthropy, small or large, in piecemeal ways. And those piecemeal ways I've sort of, over the years of struggling with fundraising for Women's Trust and other places, I sort of have two camps. One is vanity philanthropy, where people want to have their name in a group. They really haven't done the education on an issue. They just know their friends are part of it, and they want their name on the wall or on a page in a book. And so they give it a certain level that kind of ranks them. And it's effective, but is their focus. And the other extreme is something I call compassion fatigue. And that's where you give $10 to 100 organizations or $100 to 10 organizations, and you kind of parse out your giving, and you really don't get involved, you don't get committed, you don't get educated, you don't become an advocate. And I think you're missing the boat on your philanthropy. Getting focused, I love that word in the title. So let's talk about a grassroots. Someone's starting a grassroots organization. Let's go to the other side, the dark side. You are looking at a founder. Founders are very dangerous. Founders are trouble. Founders make people mad. And founders are, if you're really doing something you love, we tend to be unstoppable. And so in 2003, I decided to celebrate my 60th birthday, following an example of someone who at age 60 had gone to Nepal. She'd gone on a trek. She lives in California. That's where I lived at that time. And she saw the poverty, and she decided to go back. And the first thing she did when she went back was partner with someone who lived there half of the year and start a daycare center for street sweeping women who had their babies on their back, 4 a.m., working with chemicals. And then she's gone on to amazing things. Her name is Olga Murray. And I was able to do pro bono work while I was in the middle phase of my life. Someone once said life is in thirds. The first third you learn, the second third you earn, and the last third you return. So age 60 was my the established date for my beginning, the return phase of my life. And I think picking a date is extremely important. So here I am, I'm wandering around Wilmot, and I am saying, what am I going to do at age 60? And so I think, well, I want to go outside of this country. I want to go outside of this country because the reports, the news, how could it be this way? What's going on? Why isn't change happening? And so I finally got it. I woke up one morning and it came to me whole. This is one of those things it's a good dream. So I'm going to go to Africa, find a village, and start a micro-lending program. That's what I'm going to do to celebrate turning 60. So, so of course, I start talking to my friends about it, and they say, "Are you nuts? Are you crazy?" And my birthday was January 2003. I was trying to find anyone who knew anyone. I decided on Ghana because I narrowed it down to a country where it made sense that an individual could be successful. It was safe. It was a democracy. The economy seemed to be positive. And so I said Ghana, because you can't fly to Africa, right? You have to pick a country. And then I started finding names of people who might know someone in Ghana. And with immense networking, really trying, really taking it seriously, I had assembled 5 names. And I couldn't get them on the phone, and I couldn't get them, there was no email really in Africa in 2003. So I decided to fly there, and I flew there March of 2003. And I wanted to do this by the time I was 60. I can't even explain that I got to a hotel room, and I picked up the phone to call the first person, and they said, "We're waiting for you." And I went, "What?" And sure enough, it was someone who took me to Pokause village. And from that, I established the Women's Trust of Pokause Village. And we do micro-lending. That's how we started. It's a great base. It's double-entry bookkeeping. You hire local people. You can start small. I sold my second car for capital. I went back 6 months later after I got there with a money belt and enough money to start the program. In 3 weeks, we became an NGO. We became incorporated. We met enough women to start, and cash was released in January of 2004, on my next birthday. So over the years, we have had impact. We have a fantastic annual report that you must go online and look for. It is so exciting because this is our 8th year or 9th year, I don't know which one it is. And there's a timeline in the middle. And it shows what we've done. And my God, I just look at this and I go like, I can't believe this has happened. And we have served over 2,300 micro-lending clients in a town of 20,000, so that's impact. That's 10%, more than 10%. And think of the ripple effect. We currently have 142 girls on scholarship. We're keeping them in school. We're getting them through school. It isn't that simple. It isn't money alone. You learn from them. You learn that you have to bring enrichment. You have to listen. You have to be willing to stand up to setbacks. And there's a whole bunch of other things we've done. But the most important thing we've done is at the guidance of a very important board, we decided we wanted to migrate management to Ghana. You can't do it from here. That's a big step too. How do you find an executive director of the caliber of Wilma Longden? And it came by going 4 times in 2010. That was the goal. Trip number 1, I called anyone I had met in Accra and asked them if I could see them. Trip number 2 in March, I pitched them, said, would you be on the board? I got 100% response. Trip number 3, in June, we had our first board meeting, and we identified the need to find an executive director in Ghana. One of the women on the board, and this is the power of being an individual can do this. A person on the board was the niece of a woman I know in my church when I go to New York. And she's Ghanaian. Isn't this amazing? I mean, this is the kind of thing, when you focus and you put your mind to something, things start happening. So trip number 4, We interviewed 4 candidates. The board there, these are the things that amaze you. The board there said, we want all the candidates to come in with a 5-year strategic plan for Women's Trust. And I went, are you joking? Oh my goodness. And they all did, and Wilma came in, and she was the last one, and I'll tell you, she mesmerized the room. And we hired her. She started February 2nd. And so this year, at the end of this year, I stepped back. They don't let me say step down. Step back to founder only. And next year, my 10th year, I will be a resource to Ghana. I will be a resource to the staff here, headed by Kristen Ash, who graduated from Colby Sawyer, went to Kearsarge High School, and it's on its way. And so I just want you to know that you can decide, you can devote you can get going, and now I get to have some fun. That was fun too. But I'm going to concentrate on the second half of our mission, and that's been in place for a long time. And the second half says, inspire others to do the same elsewhere. And I'm here today with you, aren't I? I have a VW pop-top Eurovan Winnebago conversion camper. And I am going to go around the country in my camper, and I am going to meet with circles of women who learn about me maybe through Twitter. And I'm calling it my Tweetmobile.
There you go.
And if they have a flat driveway and exhibit some education, I will show up at their house for a meeting. And we can help emerging economies far away. They can make a commitment to a community on the ground, make it personal, make it long-term, make it a listening relationship, go slowly, and we can have impact and change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next panelist really doesn't need an introduction. Teri Norelli, after after 8 two-year terms in the New Hampshire House, she was recently elected as House Minority Leader. So I'm very pleased to introduce Speaker Norelli.
Thank you. Well, aside from the fact that I'm a little bummed out that I'm not live streaming this, I'm really excited to be here. It's particularly gratifying to me, and I'll bet to a number of other women of my age in the room, to see so many young women and also some young men in the audience. So we're very excited. Some of us are getting just a little bit tired, maybe. So we're happy that you've got some enthusiasm and some interest and some passion that you're going to bring forth. And I know that I'm already inspired by everything that my panelist colleagues have already told you. So I know that you will be too. You know, most people think that legislators, you know, what we do is work on political issues. But as Jamilah said, we're just I'm really just regular people, just like all of you. And I think that I'm going to share with you, as Dana did, my personal path to where I am now, not because it's about me, but because I think many of the things that led me to get here will provide to you perhaps not quite as exotic strategies as Dana has offered, but really some strategies that you can use to affect change in our communities. As I said, I'm just a regular person, an ordinary concerned citizen who was active in my community. And if you had asked me 2 months before I filed the first time I ran if I would ever have served 1 year in the legislature, let alone be in my 15th year, I would have told you you were crazy. But I began my advocacy on behalf of women back in the mid-'70s. I worked in an office building, and I had a colleague down the hall someone broke into, she was a single mom, somebody broke into her house in the middle of the night and raped her. And over the coming days and weeks, I actually got to see firsthand just what kind of devastation that can have on somebody. I got to see firsthand just how powerless she felt. And I was damned if I was going to be powerless. So I decided I had to do something about this. Nothing big, but something. And so I got together with some other women in our office building, and we decided to have a Women's Day. And we invited groups like somebody from the police department to talk about self-defense, and we invited someone from the local organization called PAR. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time, People Against Rape, to talk about what they do. And during this day, I actually got to see exactly what PAR did and how they, the kind of work that they did and how they interacted, actually. This colleague was at the event, and I got to see how they interacted with her. And I thought, this is a really good organization. And I've got lots of time. I was young. I didn't have children at the time. I had time to volunteer. I decided to get involved and became an advocate for what we then referred to as victims of rape. Today we have better terms called sexual assault survivors. But I advocated for them, I supported them, and I joined the Speakers Bureau for the organization and started to inform community members about this issue, about the fact that this is a political issue, about the fact that it's an issue of power, not an issue of sex. When I came to New Hampshire, I did work some more on that issue. In fact, Monica Zuloff and I served on the Board of Sexual Assault Support Services out on the Seacoast together. And one day I was with a small group of women, and somebody was talking about the fact she was pregnant and that she had considered having an abortion and had decided against it. Somebody else said, well, aren't we lucky that you still have the right to make that choice? And that really stopped me short. And I thought, you know what? I do take that for granted. And I shouldn't take that for granted. Which is why, not very long after that, actually, I had an opportunity to do some volunteer work with NARAL New Hampshire. And so I did. And working with NARAL, now working with sexual assault support organizations, I was able to work on an issue and to help inform the public about that issue. But I wasn't advocating any policy changes. I wasn't working on any elections, but it does have an impact. When I started to volunteer with NARAL, I stepped it up to what I would say is the next level, and that's actually starting to lobby for changes in policy and to help to let's see, who got the 50 votes today? Elect progressive people to the legislature, pro-choice people to the legislature. And actually, as part of that organization, got to work with a group towards making change in Concord. In 1995, I had an opportunity to travel to Beijing to the UN's Fourth World Conference on Women, as some of you know, the largest gathering of women that we've ever had in our history. And that really drew lots of worldwide attention to many of the issues that we've talked about today, including actually CEDAW, and violence against women and micro-lending and many of those issues. And when I came back, through various circumstances, I met about a dozen other women from New Hampshire who had also traveled to the Fourth World Conference. And we ended up coming together and putting on what we called Bringing Back Beijing, a conference at the State House that drew about 600 women and men to talk about the very kinds of issues that we're talking about today. There were breakout work sessions all day. And again, it was talking about women's issues, talking about why they're political, talking about what women can do about them. And about that time, somebody came to me and tried to recruit me to run for the legislature. And the first time I said no and walked away. And after several weeks, what really convinced me was she said, you know, you've worked on these political issues for decades. And if you run for the House, you can continue to work on those very same issues. It's just a different venue. And it will have a statewide impact instead of just a regional one. And that got me to thinking. And lo and behold, within that 2 months, I had filed to run for the legislature. And of course, now I'm the one that's doing the recruiting, so be careful if I come to talk to you. But I think here what you can see is that you can work with a group that is involved with policy, but not necessarily work on the policy. If you're thinking about like domestic violence groups, the coalition is represented here, or sexual assault support groups. You could work, if you're interested in children's issues, and groups like Big Brothers Big Sisters, be one, the Children's Lobby, many organizations that provide services for a lot of the issues that we talked about today. You could alternatively work for organizations that actually do advocate for public policy changes. Now, some of those organizations only advocate for public changes, and some of those organizations actually do both advocating and electoral work and help to try to elect candidates. New Futures is one that works to advocate on behalf of lowering underage drinking and increasing treatment, but they don't do electoral work. NARAL New Hampshire, on the other hand, and Liz and I have served on that board together, does both. You know, they talk about the issue, they educate the public, they advocate for public policy changes, and they have a political electoral arm that helps to elect the progressive candidates that we were talking about earlier. I did all of these things in my life as a volunteer. And those opportunities are obviously open for everybody. But then again, there are also professional opportunities in all of those kinds of organizations as well, because they need financial people, they need executive directors, they need field coordinators, they need office people. So you can look for opportunities to do this, whether you're doing it as in a volunteer capacity or in a professional capacity. So I just want to add, on an individual basis as well, that there are a number of things that you should be doing. The first of which is voting. And I have to say, when Risha got up earlier today and asked how many people, when she said how many people voted in the general election, not every hand in this room went up. There is no excuse for every hand in this room, because I don't think there's anybody under 18 in here, but everyone in this room should be voting. If you are a U.S. citizen, I suppose there might be an excuse or two in here. If you're a U.S. citizen, if you're over the age of 18, you should care, and you cared enough to come out here and spend the entire day. So you should care enough to go to the booth and to bring your friends and family with you, to meet candidates. You had the opportunity to meet Annie Custer this morning, to talk to them about their position on the issues about which you care, to try to convince them about thinking about it the way you do, to work for candidates, to support those candidates, to contact, you know, there are 400 legislators in New Hampshire. There's one that lives near you. And you can call them on the phone, or you could write them, or you could email them. But you can have a dialogue with them about the issues about which you care. New Hampshire's very, very, very accessible in that way. And then the last individual thing that you can do, and I know it's not right for everybody, but for many at some point in your life in this room it will be, and that is to run yourself for office. So I leave you with, be informed. You're doing that by being here. support issue-friendly candidates, advocate for policy change, work with organizations that do all of those things. And if you're ever thinking about running for the New Hampshire legislature, come see me.